I was put in touch with someone who's had experiences on their property. They started off very scared, and eventually the fear subsided. I asked if they would share some of their experiences. They wished to remain anonymous. Here is their experience. I asked, how did the activity start? How we really first knew there was something going on was the 4th of July weekend, 2015. Relatives were visiting from out of town for the holiday. I think it was about lunchtime. We were sitting outside, out back on the deck, just having lunch, and I'm like, I'm gonna take the dogs out. And so I grabbed the dogs, took them out for a walk, like I've been doing for I don't know how many years we've been living here. We're going down by the woods, and I see they've run off in the corn, and they wouldn't come back. And I keep seeing them dart back and forth in the rows of corn. I'm whistling and calling, and finally I walk out there and I'm like, what the heck are they looking for? They're like hunting or tracking or something. I happen to look down and there's a freaking huge footprint. I mean, it looked like a person. There's toes and everything, but it was freaking giant. I wear a size 12 shoe, and it was 1.5 times my foot size. So then I look up and I'm like, holy sh! There's another one, and then there's another one. I go into the next row of corn and there's another set of tracks, just a little bit smaller. Then the next row, there's another set of tracks. There was 4 different sized tracks, and they were all like 100, 150 yards long, going the full length of the woods, and one went even further. So that's the first thing that happened. I went back and spoke to everyone. I said, you guys come out and look at this. They walk over there, and one suggested it's probably just a homeless person. I was like, in the mud? Barefoot? At the time, we had tons of rain. Everything was swamped and mud. Everything was just a mess out there. I was like, who would be walking around barefoot, and who has feet that big? And the stride was about 5 to 6 feet apart. I said, who the heck can walk like that? Because they were all in a line, like a typical Sasquatch track. So that was the first thing that got us thinking. I was like, holy crap. My next question. Then I asked, so that was the first time you ever noticed? Their response. No, there were other things earlier in the year. We just put it off to nothing. But that was the first thing that got me thinking, holy crap, maybe there are actually Bigfoots out here. I never thought the Midwest had anything like that. I thought maybe in the mountains out west, but not out here in cornfields and stuff. So that's where it started. And then from then on, every frickin' day it was screams and howls and yells, all kinds of stuff. Also, sometimes it sounded like a woman being killed. You always hear about that. Then I said, now we need to call somebody. Another family member was like, what are we gonna do? We have these things living back here now. We gotta move. Everybody was scared. I called the sheriff. He basically laughed at me. I didn't tell him, hey, there's Bigfoot. I just told him what I'm finding. There's large tracks, there's a lot of yelling and screaming at night, and loud noises. The sheriff said, you sound like you have a Bigfoot, and then he starts laughing at me. Oh, I'll send a car up. No car showed up. Then I called DNR. Same thing. It was funny though. He asked me, do you ever see any strange cars parked by your house? I'm like, no. But now I know when there's reports of stuff, you'll get all kinds of people showing up, investigators, researchers, stuff like that. So I said, no, I haven't seen anything like that. The DNR officer said, well, I'll have to swing by and take a look at it. Never heard anything from him. Everything kept going, and I finally went online to search, and I ran across a Sasquatch research organization. I dialed the number, didn't go into detail, just said I'd like to speak to a researcher and ask some questions. Here's my number. And literally a week later, I'm in the Lowe's parking lot getting plaster of Paris to cast these tracks. It was a good month and a half before the rain finally washed them all away. But while I'm in the Lowe's parking lot, an investigator from the organization called me, and they said, hey, there's a researcher in the next town over. And I was like, no way. There's researchers out here too? You know, we were all new to this stuff. The researcher came by the next day, comes to the house, and we're all out there with him in the backyard, and he's like, do you mind if I do a knock? I was like, a knock? What the hell is a knock? And he explained to me, you know, knock on a tree and all that. And I'm like, hey, knock yourself out, you know. I had no clue about any of that stuff. So he whacks on the tree 3 times. A couple seconds later, from way back on our property, we hear frickin' 3 knocks respond. My significant other and I look at each other, and first thing that comes across my mind is, okay, This guy dropped somebody off, they snuck out there, and they're just playing with us now. But this guy is flipping out. You know, he was like, wow, because it was the first time he's ever got a response. He was a fairly new researcher, and he was like, oh my God. We were walking through the woods, and he saw so many footprints that we never saw, and we walked the woods every day, but this was off trail and stuff. So he left a recorder and got amazing recordings of them over the next few days. The very next day, actually, we're out there. He does the same thing and says, hey, I'm going to do a whoop and a knock. I'm like, go ahead. He does a whoop and a knock. And 3 seconds later, we hear, hey, hey, from the corn. And we thought it was 3 hays. But when we listened to the recording, it ended up being hey, hey, and then a knock. He says, what the hell was that? I said, sounded like something yelling, hey, hey. He goes off running toward it in the corn, and I'm like, this freaking guy's crazy. So he has all this stuff analyzed by professionals. One guy was a linguist for like the military or something, and that's what he does. He likes to break down audio. He has some kind of crazy setup that will do all that stuff, and he's like, oh yeah, that was definitely a vocalization and a knock afterwards. The researcher sent them so much stuff from our house, and I've got so many emails back of what he's heard and this and that, and I was like, holy crap. But the guy who was researching the audio was like, I don't know where you're at because we didn't disclose the location, but you've got some of the best vocals I've ever heard, and knocks and stuff. We thought those were nuts. We've been living here for a number of years now, and we thought those were just nuts and stuff falling off of the tree. And then we found out after he told us, because we tried simulating it, you know, throwing nuts up into the air, throwing it against the tree. But then we would hear it all year long. Never really put 2 and 2 together. Like, why are we hearing nuts in the spring since there's no nuts on the trees in the spring and stuff like that, you know? We hear it all the time, and he's like, I have never heard so many knocks in my life. So it was just one thing after another. I could go on for like 2 weeks telling you all the stuff that we've experienced. My next question. I asked if they were afraid. Their response. Yeah, and we didn't know. And that's the thing about this researcher. They said there's never been a report of anybody ever getting hurt, and that eased our fear. He's like, it's never been proven that anybody's ever been killed or anybody hurt or anything like that. So he's like, don't worry about that stuff. And then with that one yelling, hey, hey, I yell at my dogs all the time. I'm like, hey, get over here. Hey, get over here. It's like they're imitating me, mimicking what they hear me saying all the time. My next question. So then I asked if it was things like that that helped to quell your fear a little bit. Their response. Exactly. Yes, little by little. There was this recording like the next day. Some of us were on the back deck just having cereal on the table, and then they went back into the house. While they're out there eating, this thing is like, and then they imitated sort of some moaning sounds. And then when they go in the house, and you could hear it like it was upset that they left. It was almost like it was whining or crying or something. It was crazy. It was like a grizzly bear back there growling or something. It was wild. So yeah, little by little, we started to think, okay, if these things wanted to hurt us, they could have done it. Break through the house or whatever. We still weren't going out into the woods, and I still to this day will not walk through my woods at night. Not because I feel like I'm going to get killed. I just don't feel like something grabbing me or whatever. Because one of us has been grabbed when riding a 4-wheeler through the woods. They'll be riding the 4-wheeler, and then all of a sudden something grabs their arm or smacks their back and things like that. And they'll be hauling back to the house, you know? But that's why I initially called the police. We heard screams, yells. Then one day, 2 of us took the 4-wheeler to the back of the woods. And they always picked up wild berries, the wild blueberries and raspberries that grow back there. They were picking them, and one said it felt like something is watching me. So they got back on the 4-wheeler and started driving back to the house. They were on the outside going really slow looking into the woods. Then they got to one spot where we cleared a bunch of trees, where we have a tree stand where we bow hunt for deer or whatever. So you can kind of see through the woods a little bit. And then one of them catches something mid-stride. They saw an 8-foot Sasquatch. And it was like a linebacker stance, you know, knees bent, arms down. And it looks like it just froze because they saw it and stopped the 4-wheeler. They stared at it and said that it was probably about 10 yards away. Then they hauled ass back to the house, got inside, locked everything up, called us and said we just saw one. They were pretty upset over it, and that was when we started calling the cops. I called the DNR, I called the sheriff. I was like, we got to do something. But yeah, we went from terrified And then the researcher kept easing our fears. It was a couple months, and then we were a bit more calm about it. During a few months, we wouldn't even really go outside day or night. We'd just feed the dogs, and that's it. I had a rifle loaded up in the bedroom, and I always carried a handgun on me. So then I asked about how they transitioned to becoming less afraid. Well, by the time we were gifting, the fear was pretty much over, because we had to go to the woods to gift. Someone somewhat local we met with some habituation experience helped with that, and it was after speaking with them that we started gifting. Eventually I mentioned to them, don't do food anymore, because we were doing food here and we caught one coming out of our garage, as we knew he was in there to find some food we had stored. So then we said, okay, nope, no more food. It was just marbles and balls, toys, lights, and stuff like that. We think after a while they got bored with it. It all kind of slowly stopped eventually. We think the little ones wanted the sweet treats and stuff like that, and so we're like, nope, we're not doing that anymore. It's either toys or nothing. And then they kind of laughed. My next question. So eventually, you even kind of liked it? Their response. Yeah, because then we were seeing them all the time. That was frickin' cool. I've seen them head on 7 times. 7 times. 100%. No doubt at all I saw them. I saw them move, I saw them blink, and then probably another 24 or so times where I was like, whoa, I just saw a shadow or something in my peripheral. Stuff like that. I can remember every single one that happened. I saw large ones, medium ones. One time I saw 2 little ones right on the side of the house over there, about a 2-footer and about a 3.5-footer. And they were just playing out there in the snow. It was the same January. It was literally like a week or 2 after I saw that female. Those were her little ones, I'm guessing. My significant other thought the whole thing was that a female had babies here, and that's why they held up camp here for a little while, until the little ones got bigger or something. It finally got to the point where we heard the little ones screaming and yelling out there. It sounded like a playground full of kids, along with like if you went to see monkeys at the zoo. Combine those noises together, and that's what we used to hear out there. We used to hear them run across the roof at night, all the way across the ceiling, back and forth. Then you would hear a whoop, and everything would stop. You could hear them running and jumping off the roof. I was like, Mom saying, yep, that's enough kids, time to come home. We used to hear all kinds of crazy stuff like that. My next question. I interjected that I have heard that they are very protective of the children, and it seemed like they must trust you to allow that. As people say, they don't just allow their children to just go anywhere. Their response. Yeah, my significant other said it seems like a nursery to them, like they left the little ones here and the bigger ones went out and did whatever they had to do. And they knew we weren't going to hurt the little ones. And I would protect them with my life if it came down to it, where then I had guns to protect them. Every little noise out there, because that researcher had me paranoid, thinking that there's going to be like helicopters, which we did have one time. A helicopter flew over and it was above the woods for like half an hour. I was like, what the heck is this guy doing out there? It was a black helicopter. Never figured that out. But yeah, then I got protective. I wouldn't say anything to anyone and watching what I said in front of anyone. Yeah, that's what we thought. With that female, they stopped here and stayed here for a while. That maybe the little ones were too little to travel or whatever. It was pretty cool. My significant other has seen them out the window and has seen some weird stuff. Side note, I have a second part to this where the description of the female goes into detail. My next question. So the way you went from really scared to not really scared is that you just kind of went in blind, like you really didn't have a recipe or rule book, so you just lost a little fear over time, realizing that they didn't try to hurt you or anything? Their response. It's weird, because as we became more comfortable with them, they started becoming more comfortable with us. There was no more screaming and yelling and stuff like that we were hearing out there. As we got more comfortable with them, there was more like subtle type things, more communicative type things. And that's why I've always felt, and I've heard it said before, that they're only going to give you what they know that you can handle. So once we settled down with them and the fear, because God, we had so many bonfires. Oh my God. We used to have bonfires every so often. Now it was like every night we had bonfires. And you'd like hear a giant tree come crashing down and we'd all go running in the house. Then next day we go out there and there's no tree down anywhere. They were mimicking that noise. So then we would start to get braver and sit out there and listen to this big crash or a big whoop or yell or something like that. We just said, nope, we're not running in the house anymore. We live here. If that's what you want to do, we're just going to take it. As scared as we were, we just sat in the chairs. As they realized that, hey, we can't scare these people anymore, it started to change. It wasn't about that anymore, because that's their entertainment. They think it's comical to scare the crap out of us. That's the end. Of course, as they said, they could have told many more experiences. I was really interested in how they became less fearful, eventually were even grateful for the experience. I have a second video coming where things get pretty strange.